What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Thrive by Nutrition podcast. So excited to bring you guys another episode this week. I know it's been a couple of weeks since I posted an episode. Sorry, I apologize for the hiatus, but just a lot of life stuff going on. Trying to push through it, get through it, get through school, everything like that. But this is something that I just want to keep doing because I love it. I love coming on here and talking to you guys, giving you guys some information in more long form, in-depth content. So today's episode is going to be all about metabolism. So this is going to be about what metabolism is. Does it slow down? Can you increase it? What factors determine our metabolism? We're going to cover all of that in this episode. So excited. Before we get started, always remember that you can always take a screenshot of this episode if you like it. Take a screenshot of it, post it on your Instagram, post it on Facebook, post it anywhere, share it with a friend, share it with anyone that you think can benefit from this information. I want to get this out to anybody that could possibly use this to better their health, better their physique goals, get closer to their performance goals, or just in general, increase their education. So definitely don't be afraid to share this. Tag me in it too, so I know you listen to it and I can share it on my story. Can help support each other and get the message out there. So first off, what is metabolism? So I think a lot of people, when they hear the term metabolism, they kind of just automatically think of total daily energy expenditure, or basically how many calories they burn throughout the day. That's usually how metabolism or that phrase is used. But metabolism is a lot more than that, actually, and it goes a lot deeper. So the definition of metabolism is the chemical processes that occur within a living organism in order to maintain life. There are millions of chemical processes that occur in our body to kind of help us survive. So things like digestion, absorption, converting glucose to glycogen, converting glycogen to glucose, energy production, ATP usage, breakdown, things like that. All of that is considered metabolism. And these are things that a lot of people don't really think about. Most people, like they said, when they use the term, they just think of total daily energy expenditure, or how many calories or energy, how much energy they burn throughout the entire day. So what makes up this total energy expenditure then? So there are three main components when it comes to total daily energy expenditure. Number one is our basal metabolic rate, aka BMR. Number two is the thermic effect of food, or TEF. And the third component is physical activity. And this physical activity can be divided into two kind of subcategories: exercise activity or non-exercise activity. And we're going to go into depth on all three of these variables, all the subcategories, and talk all about them, so you guys are experts at them. So the first main component of our total energy expenditure is basal metabolic rate, or BMR. So BMR is the amount of energy needed to sustain really basic life processes, things like respiration, our heartbeat, renal or kidney function, brain and nerve function, active transport, the synthesis or creation of different proteins in the body or other complex molecules. So this is what makes up our basal metabolic rate. All of those chemical processes in our body that just kind of occur naturally, that we really don't have any control over. And this makes up about 65% of our total daily energy expenditure. So a huge portion, definitely more than half, a little less than 2/3, just under 2/3 of our energy expenditure is just BMR. So most of this energy that we use at rest is contributed 27% to the liver, 19% to the brain, 10% to the kidneys, 7% to the heart, and around 18% to skeletal muscle. There are multiple factors that affect our BMR, or our basal metabolic rate. Number one is body composition, and these are not in order on their significance. I'm just listing them off. So number one, like I said, is body composition. So When I say body composition, I mean basically how much lean mass someone has versus fat mass. So lean mass or muscle mass, what we would call it, has a higher metabolic activity. So basically, muscle mass burns more calories than having adipose tissue or fat mass does. This difference is really, really small though. So it's not anything to um, like hang your head on. Like it's not going to make a huge difference. So if you have 10 pounds extra muscle, you're not going to be burning 1,000 extra calories per day or something like that. But it does make a slight difference. Surface area of someone's body, so pretty much their body size, specifically height as well. So the taller an individual is, the more energy their BMR is going to burn throughout the entire day, just because they have a larger body, and a larger body, it's going to take more energy to preserve that body. Um, Aging as well. So the older we get, our BMR often decreases, and this is probably due to a decrease in lean mass or muscle mass, like we mentioned, and an increase in fat mass. Um, Also, a reduction in just general activity is probably another big contributor to a lower BMR as we age. Gender as well. Women generally have less muscle mass or lean mass than men, which this is going to lead to, like we mentioned before, kind of a slightly lower BMR. Also, if an individual or a female is pregnant or they're lactating, they're going to have a higher BMR. So their energy throughout the day that they use is going to increase due to developing a fetus, or also just producing milk for the infant. Also, our environmental temperature plays a role in our BMR. So, cold environments can actually increase our metabolic rate due to shivering to try to generate body heat. So, if you go in a really cold room and you're shivering, that shivering is going to burn calories in order to produce heat to keep your body warm. Um, Same thing goes for very hot environments. So very hot environments can also increase BMR, mostly due to blood circulation increases in the hot environment, as well as um, increased activity in sweat glands. So the more sweat we produce to try to keep our bodies cool, we actually burn calories producing that sweat. So hot environments can also increase our BMR a little bit too. Another factor that can alter our BMR is energy restriction. So, what I mean by energy restriction is kind of food or calorie restriction. So, if we are decreasing our the amount of calories we're eating, or if we are somehow in a famine and in a starvation phase or anything like that, we're gonna lose lean body mass, and that is going to lower our BMR, and then we are also going to have lower levels of NEAT, non-exercise activity, which is something that we are going to talk a lot about later on. But that reduction in non-exercise activity can also reduce our BMR. I'm going to take a drink for a second. All right, now we're going to move on to component number 2. So we talked about BMR, which is the biggest component of our energy expenditure, makes up about 65% of our total metabolic rate. So a big component right there. Number 2 is going to be our thermic effect of food, or TEF. So this is sometimes called diet-induced thermogenesis, or also called the specific effect of food. I think the thermic effect of food, that phrase just describes it a little better, but this is the energy expended during the processing and storing of food or nutrients that we eat. So basically the digestion and absorption of nutrients. So this makes up about 10% of our total daily energy expenditure. So not a whole lot, 10%. So for example, if you eat 100 calories, your body will use a certain amount of calories, or AKA energy, to digest and absorb that 100 calories of food that you just ate. Even if you consumed 100 calories, you may only be getting like a 90 calorie net gain from that, because your body used maybe 10 calories to digest and absorb that food, for example. Different macronutrients, which are the nutrients that we actually get calories from, such as protein, carbs, and fats, they actually have different thermic effects. So protein has the greatest thermic effect of all of the macronutrients, which is around 20 to 30%. So our BMR increases 20 to 30% when we eat protein. Carbohydrates are second, around 5 to 10%, and fat is the lowest, around 0 to 5%. Now, I will say this. This does not mean to just go ahead and only eat protein in order to try to maintain a better body weight, because it has a higher thermic effect and you're going to increase your metabolism or your metabolic rate by eating more protein. Um, Protein is very important as far as maintaining muscle mass and keeping muscle mass and muscle recovery, but it's not going to make a huge impact on your metabolic rate, because we're talking an extra 15 to 20% of thermic effect of only 10% of our total energy expenditure. So it's a very, very small percentage still. But I will say that it is a little higher than, carbs and fats. Plus, carbs and fats play so many other very important roles in our body in terms of maintaining our overall health and well-being. So those definitely don't need to be cut out. And I'll just leave it at that. So the third component to our total daily energy expenditure is physical activity. Now, this third component, when I say physical activity, I'm referring to any kind of activity completed, whether it's planned or if it's just general movement that's completed throughout the day that's not really planned. And this total activity makes up about 25% of our total daily energy expenditure. So still not a huge percentage. And the percentage is a lot smaller too when we talk about these two subcategories that it can be divided into. So it can be divided into two categories. The one category is exercise activity thermogenesis, and the other category is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So circle back to the exercise activity thermogenesis. This is any kind of planned exercise. So this is what you would normally think of when you think of physical activity. So things like lifting, running, swimming, biking, hiking. I already said swimming, canoeing. Any kind of planned activity that you think of as exercise. Like, I'm going to go exercise to kind of maintain my health and burn calories. People actually often severely overestimate how many calories they burn from exercise. So, for example, using a chart in my Metabolism book, a 150-pound person running at about a 7.5 mile per hour pace for around 30 minutes only burns around 400 total calories. And just for kind of reference or comparison, this doesn't even match the amount of calories that's in a one double chocolate chunk brownie from Starbucks, according to their website at least. According to their website, their brownie that I just mentioned is around 480 total calories. And like I just said, running at a 7.5 miles per hour pace for 30 minutes straight for a 150-pound person only burns around 100 or 400 calories, which, in my opinion, 7.5 miles per hour for 30 minutes is tough. I literally don't even think I could do that, especially nonstop for 30 minutes. So you have to do really, really strenuous exercise for a long period of time to burn really a ton of extra calories. And this is why I really don't think people should look at exercise as a way to burn calories per se. I think exercise should be done for enjoyment and just for its overall health benefits, like increased muscle mass, increased muscle tone, cardiovascular health, increased bone density, and so on. It shouldn't be looked at as a means to kind of burn calories to make up for high calorie foods that you had earlier in the day, because you're going to be on the treadmill if you're doing that for forever, because like I said, it doesn't burn a ton of calories, but it does have a lot of health benefits. So still definitely do planned exercise. The next component of overall activity is non-exercise activity thermogenesis, also called NEAT. So NEAT consists of things like walking to work, typing, yard work, fidgeting, talking with your hands, maintaining your posture even. These are things that are usually unconscious and we don't really think about that we are even doing throughout the entire day, but they burn calories. And these are highly dependent on the individual, on their individual lifestyle, and their current life situation. So, for example, like the transition to more desk jobs, aging, even your location of where your house is, all of those things can play an important role in how much actual NEAT you get throughout the day. Um, NEAT is viewed as one of the biggest components of regulating body weight as well. So NEAT can vary pretty widely from individual to individual, especially due to changes in energy or food intake. So, for example, multiple studies show that when we overfeed people or animals, um, aka just giving them more calories than what their body typically burns throughout the entire day, um, their NEAT actually increases. So they just move around more. Maybe they fidget more. Maybe they talk with their hands more. And then when you underfeed the same people, their NEAT typically decreases. So they stop talking with their hands as much. Maybe they don't pace around as much. Maybe they don't go on walks as much. So this kind of unconscious activity either increases or decreases based on our calorie intake to try to maintain a stable body weight. Now, it doesn't always do its job perfectly in terms of making sure you don't gain or lose any weight, but it does try to put its influence on that and try to push us towards kind of body weight regulation in that way. Our needs can also decrease due to excessive planned physical activity. So, for example, someone may decide, they want to start being more active, and maybe they want to lose weight, and they go to the gym, and they end up being in there for over 2 hours, killing themselves, doing a ton of cardio, working out like crazy, pushing themselves, past their limits and more. And then they come home and they are laying on the couch the rest of the 14 hours of the entire day and they don't move. When in reality, they might have burned more calories if they just went to the gym and maybe had a solid, moderate to vigorous workout for maybe 45 minutes. And then they came home and they still had enough energy to kind of maybe go out and do some yard work. Maybe they decided to take their dog on a walk because they had more energy. So this kind of regulation of NEAT can also increase or decrease based off of your planned physical activity that you do as well. So we know all of the components of our total daily energy expenditure. So how do we even calculate this? How do we measure it? How do we determine what our total daily energy expenditure is, so we know about how much we should be eating per day? Well, I'm about to tell you. So first, in order to calculate our total daily energy expenditure, we have to first measure or estimate our BMR, or our basal metabolic rate, and then we kind of go from there. So BMR is assessed indirectly by measuring oxygen consumption. So BMR is measured when someone is awake after they have had their last meal 12 to 18 hours prior, so they're kind of in a fasted state, and preferably right after they wake up. That way their body is kind of more at rest, stable position, I guess. They usually do this when the person is completely relaxed in a supine position for at least 30 minutes. And oxygen consumption is recorded as milliliters per minute for at least 10 minutes. And then they kind of convert this oxygen consumption to calculate and estimate our energy expenditure. So as you can see, to measure our BMR, we need very, very tightly controlled conditions, or else all of these numbers might be a little off. So because we need very, very tightly controlled conditions to measure our basal metabolic rate, a lot of times we measure what's called RMR, or resting metabolic rate, instead. These two terms are very, very similar, and their numbers, as far as how much energy we burn, are very, very similar. But the only difference is that RMR, you only have to fast for about 3 to 4 hours instead of 12 to 18. So because of this, our RMR calculation is usually around 10% higher than our BMR. And this is likely due to the thermic effect being calculated in there because we just haven't been fasting for as long. And RMR and BMR, those terms are usually used pretty interchangeably because there is only usually like a 10% difference, but they are two different terms and have two different calculations. An easier way, or I guess more convenient way to estimate RMR, because a lot of us don't have access to a facility that actually can measure this through oxygen consumption, is to just use a mathematical equation. So the most common equation, and the equation that I use for all of my clients to kind of estimate their energy expenditure, is I use Mifflin-St. Jeor. So this is an equation you could easily just Google online. There are tons of calculators of it online. You can find the equation there. But this equation is usually pretty accurate. It's usually accurate within around 10% for normal weight individuals, with obesity, individuals with who may be overweight, individuals with severe obesity. Ooh, I cannot talk right now. But this equation is very convenient too, because it only requires body weight, height, and age, as opposed to some equations you need to know their body fat percentage. So a lot of people just don't know what their body fat percentage is. It's hard to actually get an accurate reading of that, even with some technology that you may have access to. So for males, the RMR equation for Mifflin-St. Jeor is 10 times your weight in kilograms plus 6.25 times your height in centimeters minus 5 times your age in years plus 5. And then for females, your RMR equation is 10 times weight in kilograms plus 6.25 height in centimeters minus 5 times your age in years minus 161. So the difference in females and males is only around 166 total calories once you actually calculate it out. And this is likely in there to kind of account for those differences in muscle mass that a male typically has. And male typically has a little more muscle mass. And we talked about muscle mass just being a little more metabolically active. So it burns a little bit more calories to kind of maintain and use. And like I said, you can look up these calculators or these equations online pretty easily just by Googling Mifflin-St. Jeor, and they'll pop right up. So if you didn't catch all of that, don't feel like you need to go back and rewind a million times to write it down. It should be on the internet, but if you want to go back and rewrite it down, feel free. But keep in mind that this doesn't give you your total daily energy expenditure. This only gives you one piece of the puzzle, which is your BMR/RMR, whatever term you want to actually use. So in order to determine our total daily energy expenditure, we have to then multiply that RMR number that we get by an activity factor based off of your physical activity level. So you can find these activity factors in various places online. A lot of times the numbers are slightly different, but essentially they'll all be pretty similar. So if you're sedentary, your activity factor is likely 1 to maybe 1.4. If you are have low activity throughout the week, so maybe 2 to 4 days you're doing some kind of exercise, your activity factor is going to be around 1.4 to 1.6. If you are more active, maybe have moderate activity or exercise 5 to 7 days per week, your activity factor is going to be around 1.6 to 1.9. And then if you're very active throughout the week, training really hard at least 7 days per week, maybe doing 2-a-days, maybe you're an athlete, your activity factor is going to be around 1.9 to 2.5. So these are people who are maybe college athletes and they're doing 2-a-days, 3-a-days, and this can make a huge impact on your total daily energy expenditure. But for the average individual, maybe working out 3 to 5 times per week, it's not going to be an enormous difference. But for an example, let's say you're a 200-pound male, 5'9", 26 years old, and you lift heavy weights 4 to 5 times per week, aka you're me. But remember that the male RMR equation is 10 times your weight in kilograms plus 6.25 times your height in centimeters minus 5 times your age in years plus 5. Not going to completely bore you with all of these individual numbers, but my RMR, according to this, is around 1879. And then when I multiply it by my activity factor, which I would say is around maybe 1.6 for myself, is around 3,000 calories per day for my total daily energy expenditure, which I would say is pretty close to what it actually is. And keep in mind that this number is just going to be an estimate. It's not going to be exact. And refer back to our previous discussion on NEAT and how it increases and decreases based on energy intake. Because of this, I might be able to actually eat 3,300 calories some days and not gain weight. So I might be able to eat 300 calories above what my estimated maintenance or total daily energy expenditure is, and not gain weight because my NEAT actually increases due to these extra calories to kind of make up for that. And you can think of this opposite way. I may be able to eat 2,700 calories, so 300 calories lower than what my total energy expenditure should be, and not lose weight because my NEAT or my non-exercise activity decreases with that reduction in its calories. And this is why I kind of like to think of our maintenance calories or our total daily energy expenditure more of a range than an individual set number, because of this kind of variation in NEAT that can occur that can make our energy expenditure decrease or increase. So keep in mind that if you use a calculator like this, you use this equation and you get a certain number, it's just an estimate. And keep in mind that if you use that and you subtract 500 calories from that, from your estimated energy expenditure, there's a chance you might not actually be in a 500 calorie deficit because of these reductions in NEAT, occurring due to the reduction in calories. And keep in mind that this can work the opposite way. If you're trying to put on weight and you calculate how many calories you burn per day, just because you increase your calories by 500 doesn't mean you're going to be in a 500 calorie surplus. There are other things at play, and it's kind of this connected model where what we eat impacts how much we burn, and how much we burn impacts how much we eat. It's kind of this never-ending loop, and it's always changing. It's never an exact number, and there are so many factors that come into play. So hope you guys like this podcast all about metabolism. A lot of information, very factual information in here, a very objective information. So I think the biggest takeaway is that we don't burn a whole lot through exercise. We burn a lot through NEAT, or at least we have a large variability in NEAT depending on how many calories we're eating. And that this is just an estimate, and there's no way to really exactly pinpoint how many calories we're going to burn per day. And if you're trying to maybe lose body weight or gain body weight, the best thing to do is to track your food intake, see how your body weight responds to that food intake, and then make adjustments from there instead of being so in love with what this kind of individual number in the calculator says. So hope you guys like this podcast. Definitely remember to share it on your social media, on your Instagram, on your Facebook, wherever, on your Twitter, wherever you listen to it, wherever you want to post it. I don't care. Post it on there so someone else can listen to it and take something away from it. But thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the podcast. Love you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.